Okay, and just like that, we're live. So welcome everyone. This is the June Fan Spreecast event with Sylvia Day. If you've joined one of our earlier events, you'll know that you can just go ahead and shoot your questions to Sylvia, and she'll spend this hour answering all kinds of different questions. We'll give you an alert right now. She's not going to answer spoiler questions. So if some of those do sneak in, she won't be able to answer those, but she'll be answering all kinds of other questions about writing, about upcoming books, and things like that. There are two ways that you can submit questions for Sylvia to answer. One is there's a chat on one side of this screen. It's kind of like a toggle. So one little button says viewers, one says chat. If you're in that chat, you can go ahead and type questions in there. We can pull them from there and put them on the screen. And then also right below this video window, there's a little box that you can add a question in as well. If you want to come on camera and talk to Sylvia video to video, there's a little camera button right below here, and you can click that to put in a camera request to come on camera and talk to her. So we welcome Sylvia, and we're happy to see everyone joining us today. So we will go ahead and get started with some of these questions. So let's see here, Sylvia.
There's a lot of them.
There are. I just put that one up. The question was, will book 5 be released in 2014?
That is the plan and the hope. Of course, there's a lot of things that affect that, including what else is releasing around the time, what time of year it is. Because we do a worldwide release and not just in the United States, there's some months that tend to be really good in the US and may not be so good, say in Europe where there's a long summer holiday, or, that's just one example. But, we try to take a look at what time of year it is that the book can come out and whether it's the best time to put it out there. So all things lining up equally, we should have 4 and 5 out before the end of the year, and Crossfire will be done in 2014.
Huh? That's a lot to look forward this year. Let's see. Some of these you probably just answered, and some of these are spoilers, so I will jump away from those.
Can't do spoilers, guys. Can't do it. If you didn't read it in the book, I'm happy to explain or elaborate on something that you did read in the book. But if you didn't read it in the book, then it's a spoiler, and I can't share it with you just yet. And that's just so you enjoy the book more when you get it. Some people like my mother is one of those people. She orders dessert before dinner. She likes to read the last chapter of the book before she starts the first chapter. And I know there's a lot of other readers that are just like my mom, but there's also those of us who just want to be surprised by the story all the way through. And so in deference to those, no spoilers.
Let's see. We'll put this one up. Will there be any Renegade Angels books in 2014?
I doubt it. I doubt it. For one, even though most of it is written, it was put aside once Crossfire really exploded. The intention had been to alternate between Crossfire books and books in some of my other series. And when the demand for Crossfire became what it is, we decided to put all the other series on hold, which includes Renegade Angels. The Renegade Angels is also published by Penguin Random House, which has the Crossfire series. So, that always comes into play. That's one of the reasons why I have so many domestic publishers, is so that, I can have books that release closer together than I would if I remained with just a single publisher. But, we put that off to the side while we finish the Crossfire series. And because the Crossfire series will take so much of the publisher's time as well as my own personal time, it's extremely doubtful that we'll get the Sire story in 2014. Most likely it will be in early 2015 or sometime in 2015.
Next question from Felicia. Where in California will you be visiting?
I don't know that I have any California events scheduled for the rest of the year. I did have some earlier this year. I was in San Diego earlier. I was also in Redondo Beach earlier. Most of my California appearances tend to be in Southern California. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't have any further California appearances this year. That doesn't mean, that may not change, but I am actually working on adjusting my appearance schedule so that I'm only on the road 6 months out of the year. Typically between May and October is the plan. With me being home in a straight stretch of 6 months, so that I can get writing done in like one go rather than dividing it up between different appearances and that sort of thing. So if it falls outside of the October cutoff, then I won't be able to do it. But anytime in between May and October, it's possible that I could add more events, which would include California. But right now, I don't think I have any left this year. I will be in Vegas a lot though, which is of course my hometown. So if it's a very short flight drive from California, and if there's any place you can visit, Vegas is it. So if you guys want to come out to Vegas, I'd love to see you.
There you go. We'll put this one up. This is from Stephanie. What is the ethnicity of Gideon?
Well, Gideon is Caucasian, but of course, what does that mean? It really means he's got a little bit of everything in there. But Ava is of course half Latina, but Gideon is what we call the American melting pot of this, that, and the other thing.
And more Crossfire questions here. When will Crossfire be brought to TV? That's a popular one. If you know anything about when people will be able to view the series on TV.
I don't have any new information about the show. The last time I had an update on that was in January when I had lunch with the producers. We were, talking about the series and their plans for the series. At that time, it was guesstimated that the earliest the series would debut on television would be in the spring of 2015. That said, I haven't seen any scripts. So, without a script, you can't really get actors, and so we're not at that point yet, as far as I know. As soon as I get something, as soon as I hear something, I will absolutely let you know. On my end, I haven't sent an email recently, kind of asking for an update because, of course, my own schedule has been pretty crazy. But again, the last I heard was in January we had signed a director on for the series, and the director was supposed to be penning the first script, but I haven't seen it yet. So that's all I know for right now.
And hopefully this one isn't a spoiler. Um, it says, without giving spoilers, can you give us the general tone um, of the next book? You said that it would be, well, they're using all the, you said that Entwined with You would be happier than Reflected in You. And will your next book be more like those two or different? Can you say anything about the vibe of those books, of the new book?
Captivated is different in feeling from the other books that we've read. For one, there's a lot more stability in the relationship between Gideon and Ava. I mean, we started to see that really developing and Entwined with You. We saw, them becoming closer, spending more time, being more playful with each other. There's a certain sense of security that they feel in that book. And of course, at the end, not wanting to give spoilers for those who haven't read Entwined with You, but of course, they're in a pretty good place in their relationship by the end of the book. So, we do see that in this book, which gives them a much more solid foundation for the issues that they face. That said, they've still got, some fundamental things to work out. One of them is Ava's need for independence, and then Gideon's, possessiveness, which, plays into, he wants Ava to be on Team Cross, all the time. And for her, sometimes she has to be just Ava. She has to have things that are her own, that she owns for herself, that she does, by herself. And those things, can sometimes make Gideon feel threatened. So, we do see some push and pull between the two of them, but overall they're learning to face the issues that they have to deal with, which for Gideon is a lot. I mean, he really has not dealt with much of anything. Um, Together as a unit, the two of us against the world. So we see kind of this shifting dynamic between the two of them, where they face some things head on together, and sometimes they're butting heads against each other.
Mhm. Going through some more of these for you here. Let's try this one from Lauren. I love Carrie, Ava's best friend. How did his character come about when you started the Crossfire series? And do you have your own Carrie?
Ah, well, of course, Carrie is kind of a combination of all of the best friends that I've had and been fortunate to have, over the course of my lifetime. Carrie is actually a very interesting character for me because when I started writing Bared to You, Carrie was Carrie with an IE at the end, and it was a woman, and that was my bad because as I was writing the book, I could see that Carrie was attracted to men, and I assumed wrongly that that meant that Carrie was a woman. It wasn't until I got to chapter 6 that he kind of put his foot down and said, "You know what? You've been writing me wrong this whole freaking book, and I'm done. Until you get me right, not moving." I was, looking at it, going, something's not right, and the editor who was looking at it, she said, "There's something not right here," and when it hit me, and I was like, "Oh my God, Carrie's a guy," and I went back and I started over from the beginning, and it was already there. I mean, everything, the pronouns were wrong, but other than that, I mean, Carrie was already Carrie in every single way. It was just me who was looking at it the wrong way, and so I went back and Carrie became the Carrie that we know and love, which we now have him moving forward. But it was one of those learning processes, and that's one of those things where I talk about sometimes when I'm in writing workshops and stuff, author intrusion, and that's where the author kind of makes an assumption about something that's happening in the story, or tries to direct the story in a place that they feel that it should go. This is what I want to happen at this point, or this is what I think should happen. And the characters are, in complete opposition to that. And it's their story. They know it better than we do. So that is a classic example right there of author intrusion. Of me not really sitting there and listening to them. And of course, now I listen to everything Carrie says because he's almost always right. About everything. Ava learned that, long before I met the both of them, but I was a little slow, but now I got it.
Yes, and we all love Carrie. He's definitely a lot of questions about him. Everybody loves him. Let me grab this one from Mabel. This is among the villains in your novels. Who do you love too? And it looks like it cut off, so we don't have the rest of that one. I don't know. Maybe who do you love to hate?
Uh,
Maybe that's where she's going with that
uh, you know, um, it's one of those weird things, where a lot of my villains are people that I actually sympathize with. Whatever their motivation is for the things that they do, um, and whether it makes sense to me or not, for them, they're fully justified in whatever it is they're doing. None of them just act, out of some, crazy mental state. I mean, for them, there's always a justification for what they're doing, even if we don't agree with it. Probably one of my favorite villains would be Christopher St. John, who first appeared in Ask for It, and then of course we see him again in Passion for the Game, and he's a hero in that one. And that was kind of surprising. And actually, I was so worried when I was writing that book because the heroine is a Black Widow with a couple deceased husbands of suspicious deaths behind her, and of course Christopher St. John is a pirate and a murderer, and I was like, I don't know if my editor is going to let me write a romance with two criminal masterminds as the main protagonists. So I wrote the book straight through. I didn't say anything to her about it. When she asked me for some basic ideas about what I was writing, I was very vague. And she'd gotten used to that at that point because we'd written a few books together. And then I turned it in, and I just was biting my nails for about 48 hours. Thankfully, she was always one that as soon as she got my manuscript on her hard drive, she immediately dropped everything she was doing to read it. She was amazing that way. And so, she called me and said, "Oh my God, I love it." So I was like, "Yay!" But that was really one of those situations where I wasn't expecting him to turn out to be his own hero or to get his own love story. But that's the way that worked out, and he remained, I guess we can kind of call it an anti-hero, but really, I mean, he's pretty villainous in his own way. But when he gets his happily ever after, we feel like he deserved it, and we're happy for him to get there.
So I'm going to jump to some of these questions that are very popular and coming up a lot for you. One is about spin-offs for some of your characters. Can you is that a plan for any of your books? They've asked about several different novels. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but do you have any plans for spin-offs for any of your characters?
The only book that I have coming up that has a character that we've seen in previous books and hasn't yet had his own story is Sire from the Renegade Angel series. The third book, which is the final book in the trilogy, is his story. So we'll definitely be seeing him. Aside from that, I do not have any books on my schedule that feature characters that you've seen in other books as secondary characters. Of course, I do have Stripped Down, which is the sequel to All Revved Up, and that features Faith and Miguel, who we met in the first book, and so we'll be seeing more of them. I also have, some of the Renegade Angels novellas. We'll get to see Reyes and Kim again. So there's stories in the works where we're going to follow a couple that we've met previously, but I don't have any books aside from Sire, who was a secondary character in another story and is going to have his own book in the future.
So far, no book for Carrie. I know a lot of people are asking that. um, so for all those that are joining us now, I want to remind you how you can ask questions here for Sylvia. Right below this video window, there's a little box that you can submit questions there. And then also to the side in the chat, you can go ahead and submit your questions in the chat as well. And we'll pull those for Sylvia and she'll continue to answer them. Another very popular topic, Sylvia, and I know that you've been asked this a lot, you answer this a lot, um, is who you see playing Gideon. So I've just moved one of those questions up, but also in addition, David Gandy has been mentioned, Max Irons, and then Felicia says, besides Henry Cavill and Scarlett Johansson as Ava, who do you see as Gideon and Ava?
That's good. Now, as far as the Max Irons question, I could see him. Yes, absolutely. He's the right age. He's definitely got the sensuality down. He's a very sexy guy. So, I mean, I could absolutely see that. I do think it's kind of interesting that, Gideon, who is such a quintessentially American character, born and bred in New York, is New York down to his pores. We're talking about Cavill and Irons, who are both British actors, but I think that both of them would be great. David Gandy is gorgeous. I mean, I think he's probably one of the most beautiful men on the planet. That said, I don't think he looks like he's 28 years old. And Gideon, his age is very much integral to who he is as a character. He is still making mistakes. A lot of the mistakes he makes are mistakes that most of us made in high school and learned that lesson a long time ago. But he's been very stunted in his emotional growth. So in some ways, he's very immature, especially with Ava. She's like that, that favorite thing that you don't want anybody else to touch or play with or look at because it's all yours. So, I mean, those are things that we kind of see in Gideon, and we forgive him for those things because he's so young and he's learning. He's also still very malleable. He's open to change. He isn't set yet in his ways. Ava can still mold him in particular ways and help him to grow in different ways. And all of that is, of course, part of him being as young as he is. So I do feel that it's very important that the actor that plays him be as close as possible to the age of 28 so that, we can see that in him. Um, Gandhi, he looks like a man who's in his early 30s and as gorgeous as he is, I don't know that he could play that innocence as well. But he could surprise me, so I won't say never. But that usually turns out to be my number one concern about characters or actors that people put forward for characters is whether or not they're of the right age. And late 20s is kind of this little narrow window of time. And there's not a lot of actors that are probably as like worldwide well known that we could I could point them out and everybody would be like, oh, I know who that is everywhere. But that's definitely a consideration. As for Ava, I think I believe her name is Diana Agron. I think she would also be great. So I mean, there are some other actresses who could possibly do Ava. I know that Amber Heard is a popular choice. I would probably put another 15 pounds or so on Amber before she played Ava, but she's definitely got the attitude right. So that I wouldn't rule her out either.
I haven't heard the Diana Agron one, and I think that's actually a really good one too. I can
Yeah,
definitely see that one.
yeah, me too.
Okay, so let's see here. This is probably hard to answer. This is from Nicole. She says, out of all the books you've written, which has been your favorite to write?
That would be The Stranger I Married. And that book, I mean, literally, it wrote itself. I think that that is the fastest book I've ever written. It was a little less than 4 weeks, about 3.5 weeks from start to finish. It just wrote itself all the way through. It was the story was there. The characters were beautifully cooperative with me, and I loved it all the way through. And then the whole process was a joy, which is honestly very rare. I mean, for most books, you have these moments where you're just, joyous over something, but a lot of the times it's a lot of hard work. And the Stranger I Married is one of those books that was just a joy to write all the way through.
Um, let's see. This is from Harriet. She says, will the next historical be linked to others like they have been, or will it be in a different era, for example, Victorian?
It will. I mean, all of my books, and I mean all of them, are set in the same fictional universe. And so those readers who've read everything that I've written will see things. They'll see a hotel mentioned in one place that was mentioned someplace else, or you'll see a last name in a contemporary book that was in one of my historicals because it's a descendant of one of the characters from one of my historical books. So in my head, whether it's my futuristics or my historicals, contemporaries, sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, they're all set in the same universe and they're all working in the same spot, so you'll see a lot of those little tangents coming back and forth amongst themselves. So no matter where I set the next historical, it will be set in the same fictional universe as everything else that I've written. So it is likely that you'll see other characters that you've seen before. The thing with the historicals, the last historical I sat down to write, which was a few years ago, manifested as a steampunk historical. And when I talked to the editor about it, the editor did not want steampunk, and the story could not be anything else. And we talked about that for a while. She was hoping that I could just remove the steampunk elements and have the same story, and that's absolutely not possible. I mean, it's so inherent to the story that it just wouldn't work any other way. So that story remains in a partial state of being finished, and it's kind of like I need to get to the end of that story before I can turn my attention to what's coming next. That said, I am contracted to write more historical, so I will definitely be writing them. Plus, I love them so much as a reader and as a writer, so I will, of course, be writing one. I just have to kind of get over that the little hump of having started something that I'm madly in love with, and then having to switch gears to something that's just purely historical.
And switching gears to this is about your one of your signings here. So let me put this on the screen. Okay, so she says that this is from Katie. She says that she's attending the Edinburgh author signing next week. Do you have a limit to your books we can get signed, and can we take pictures with you? She said, P.S. I apologizing for any screaming or tears.
Oh, well, don't scream and don't cry because I can tell you, I can guarantee that if you start crying, I will start crying. And then we'll both be crying. And then we'll take a picture where we're both sobbing, and then it looks like we had a horrible time instead of a great one, which of course we will have an awesome time. So please don't cry. It's just me. I'm smaller in real life than you probably expect. I'm just a person who writes books. So please don't get nervous or anything else like that. Absolutely, you can take pictures with me. I'm always happy to take pictures. Those are fun. As to the limit of books, it depends on the line. Um, if the line is really long, and sometimes lines for my signings can be over 4 hours long. In those cases, if we're not wristbanding, which I hope that we will be, wristbanding, of course, is where you kind of get a reservation to be in line, which allows you to wander off and go meet other authors and do other things. And then when your number is called, you can come back and get your stuff signed. So then you're not actually just waiting the whole time. But depending on the time allotted for the signing and how many people are in the line, sometimes we have to limit it to two books that are personalized, where I'll have your name and a short note and my signature, and then any other books that you have with you will just be autographed versus personalized, and that's to keep the line moving so that we don't keep people waiting too long. If the line is reasonable and we don't have to worry about people waiting for hours, then we can have a little bit more leeway and I can sign more things than that. No matter what, it'll be autographed. It's just whether it'll be if I'm able to personalize everything or not.
Okay, so good to know for anyone going to some of Sylvia's events. Let's see, this is from Mandy Lou. Who are your favorite authors to read yourself?
Okay. So a book I strongly recommend, happens to be one of my favorite romances ever, is called The Fifth Favor, and it is by Shelby Reed. And you can order that on Amazon, or you can hopefully find it in your bookstore still. I believe it was reissued in November. The first time I read it was in 2005. And then it was acquired by Penguin Random House, which is, my publisher for the Crossfire series, the Shadow Stalkers, and the Renegade Angels. They picked up some of her backlist books, which includes The Fifth Favor, and they reissued it, and so it's out and available for people to read. And that's by Shelby Reed. I love that book. It's my favorite. I also love the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh. Amazing, amazing books, paranormal romance, and it's got vampires and angels, and it's wonderful. So I can't recommend the Guild Hunter series enough. I love the In Death series by J.D. Robb. For those who want to know where the Ace nickname came from and what that book was that Ava picked up when they were in the Outer Banks, it was Naked in Death, which is the first book in the In Death series. It's written by Nora Roberts under the pseudonym J.D. Robb. And I think she's somewhere like 50 books into the series. So if you haven't started yet, that will definitely keep you occupied until Captivated by You comes out, since there's a long way to go before you can get caught up in that one. Personally, I am, reading so that I'm never all the way to the end. There's always a book or two more that I can read in that series because I don't know what I'd do if I was in the mood to read a even workbook and there wasn't one that I hadn't read yet. I also love the Alpha and Omega series by Patricia Briggs. That starts actually with a novella, which you can either buy that in an anthology or you can buy it alone as a standalone digital novella. And then she's got, I believe it's 3 full-length books since then. That series releases, I think, once every 2 years. So I absolutely know what it's like to wait for the next book in the series because I am waiting many years in between each installment of those. But I fall in love with it again every time I read it. That's a great romance between two werewolves. So I can't recommend that one enough. And of course, as far as historicals, Lisa Kleypas happens to be my favorite. I've loved her for a very, very long time. I recommend all of her historicals as being fabulous. And if you like category romance or just romance with some serious alpha males that are just dripping in testosterone, I strongly recommend Olivia Gates's Harlequin Desires. Those are amazing, and she's got a bunch of those. So if you haven't read her yet, you have plenty to keep you occupied as well. They're all awesome.
Excellent, very good suggestions there. Um, this is from Kimberlyn. Can you tell us about the audiobook process? I think Jill Redfield is doing an excellent job with the Crossfire series.
I couldn't agree more. I love Jill. I can't really say too much about the audiobook process because there's a lot of it that I don't know. I can tell you just what I handle on my end. That is when we get started on recording a new one of my audiobooks, my audiobook publisher, which is Brilliance, will send me samples of narrators and then allow me to choose one. In the case of Jill, there was a couple options that I had, and I went with Jill because it was just, I mean, her voice was just it. I mean, She was just perfect, and I'm so glad that so many of the audiobook listeners agree with me that I mean, she's the only one we can imagine doing the Crossfire books, and so she will actually be doing the last two books as well. So you'll definitely get that continuity all the way through. She also narrates my Mark series, which is Eve of Darkness, Eve of Destruction, Eve of Chaos. So that's if you like her stuff, you can hear her reading some of my other works as well. She's fabulous. So that's my contribution to the process is I get to pick the narrator, and then once we do that, then they get into the studio and they start recording the readings of the books, and then you get the finished product at the end. There's a lot of complicated stuff that happens in the interim of reading that book and recording it, but I mean that's my involvement in it.
And this is from MJ. Um, what is your writing day like? Do you write with a word count in mind, or do you stop when you feel like you're in the right point in the story?
My writing day is pretty much 24/7. And because I work at home and I'm a full-time writer, I write whenever the mood strikes me. And there have been times when I've woken up 3 o'clock in the morning and had to write, and I'll get up and start writing. And then there's times when I'm up really early in the morning and writing. And sometimes I get up and it's not until 5 or 6 o'clock before I start writing. Really, it's up to the characters to decide that they're ready to get started for the day and get going. My most productive hours, when I have a choice, are from the time I wake up until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I seem to get the most amount of writing done during that time. But still, I will write outside of those hours if if a particular scene strikes me or something happens to me. I write 24/7. I There's never a day off. There's never a day when I'm not writing. And sometimes it may only be a paragraph, and sometimes it could be two chapters. I mean, it really just depends on how cooperative the characters are with me at that point in time. But it's something I do all the time. I have a MacBook Air that I carry with me when I do any sorts of appointments or have to leave the house for any length of time, or if there's any possibility that I might be waiting somewhere for something or someone. I have my laptop with me so that I can work even if I'm not at home. So I don't write to a set word count because for me it's about whether I'm feeling it, whether I'm invested in it, and the story's coming together, and I'm there and I'm excited. I can't just sit there and type out words because I'm 500 short of where I need to be, because it's just going to get thrown out anyway. For me, writing is a very organic and very passionate process. I have to be completely in it when I sit down to write, and then that I think is what you feel as the reader when you're reading the work, how invested I was in it as a writer. So I focus mostly on being completely engaged in what's happening. And if I'm not engaged, that means that something hasn't fully coalesced yet in my mind. And there may be, a couple days where I sit down and I'll work on scenes that are a little bit out of order, which I typically don't do. I write linear from beginning to end. But sometimes, if a scene is really vivid and it's not where I'm at, and wherever I'm at is not coming together the way it's supposed to be, I'll let it wait, and then 2, 3 days later, sometimes it hits me. That's what it is. That's what needs to be happening. That's where that goes, and then I'll sit down and let it go. And I've learned to trust my process that way. Otherwise, I run the risk of doing that author intrusion thing. That I talked about earlier, where I'm trying to make the story go in a particular direction instead of letting it unfold naturally the way it should, and that never works out well. I end up throwing it all out anyway. So
So sticking with the writing, there's several other writing questions. This is from Mandy. Any advice for a mom of three writing her first book? I had kids before I could start out of college, and I would love some tips from my favorite writer.
ah um well, of course, the number one thing I can tell you is to finish the story. I mean, get to the end. And I think that a lot of times we could sabotage ourselves because we keep going back over what we've written previously instead of moving forward. And that sometimes will lead to you never getting to the end. And getting to the end of the book is the hardest part. As you move forward in the story, you'll realize things need to change, adjust, shift in the beginning to get to the end. But you really have to get to the end first. And then once you get to the end, then you can go back and edit and work on it. And then you have to remember at some point that you have to let it go. I do know many writers, one who edit the first three chapters so often they never get to the end of the book. Or if they do get to the end of the book, they spend so much time editing it that they never write the second book. And so I always urge new writers when they say, you know, what advice would you give me as a new writer? And mine is always to write three novels. And that seems kind of daunting because of course once you finish the first one, you're like, well, I want it to be out there. I want people to read it. The thing is, you don't really know who you are as a writer until you get to the end of your third book. One, because it's so difficult to complete a book. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's pretty high. Somewhere in the 90% would be my guess of the number of people who say that they are going to write a book and yet never make it to the end. Getting to the end is extremely difficult, and that's where most writers will cease to be writers and just not ever finish that first book. So finish the first one. Then when you start the second one, you'll realize that's even harder to write than the first one. We call that the sophomore slump. It's very difficult to get to the end of the second book, much harder than it was to get to the end of the first. And then you have, getting to the end of the third book. The thing is, by the time you get to the end of the third book, one, you know that you can do it because you've done it three times now. You have finished three books, you can do it. Two, you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are because you've learned a lot of lessons from writing those different stories and working with different characters because each story and each character is going to teach you something new about yourself as a writer. And you're going to find those lessons over the course of those three books. When you get to the end, you're going to realize I'm really great at dialogue, I'm horrible at action, or I'm really great at action and I have trouble with my chapter breaks. They're boring. People don't want to read the next one. I mean, these are things that you'll figure out as you go along. You will also realize how long it takes you to write a book, and that is hugely important when you go to sell a book because the number one thing either a publisher or the readers, if you self-publish, are going to ask you is when is your next book going to come out, and you need to be able to have some sort of idea whether if it takes you 2 years to write a book, then that's what you tell you that the publisher acquires it or the readers who are waiting for it. Or if it takes you 6 weeks, then you can say I can get you the next book in a short amount of time. So I mean those are things that you really need to know about yourself moving forward as a writer. So just don't get stuck in editing over and over again the first part of your first book. Just get to the end, then go back, edit it once, twice, and then put it aside and start number two.
Okay. Excellent advice for all you want to be writers, all you aspiring writers out there. Continuing on the writing questions, this is from Christy, and she says, "How do you go about creating the perfect swoon-worthy leading male character?"
Ah, and that's one of those things where I feel like sometimes I get more credit than I actually do. The characters actually come to me exactly the way they are. They are fully formed in every possible way with all of their flaws and all of their the great things about them, the best parts of their personalities. They are who they are when they get to me, and I just I write them. So it's not as if I sit down and try to think, very analytically about who they are and what they're doing. I mean, they are who they are. Now that said, part of that is of being a creator is, and this is with any author, you will see traits in characters, similar traits and similar characters that the author writes, because those are traits that the author themselves finds particularly attractive. Gideon can be very protective. He can also be very possessive. Obviously, he's very sexual. I mean, these are things that I appreciate in other people, and you'll see those things. Ava is very courageous. She's very independent. She's very ambitious. Those are traits that I admire in other women, and you'll see those in a lot of my heroines. Those are traits that kind of go forward in every book. So there's that. That comes to play with any writer, and you'll see if you follow a writer for a long period of time and read a number of their books that you'll be able to pinpoint those characteristics that author is particularly has a strong affinity to, and you'll see that. But Gideon came to me just the way he is. Alistair came to me just the way he is. Wolford came to me just the way he is. I mean, they just are who they are, and I'm just fortunate. I always say that, I'm just glad that out of all the writers they could have picked to write their story, they came and asked me.
It's a great way to look at it. And here, this question is from Nicole. If you hadn't become a writer, what do you think you'd be doing?
Well, I would be writing. Nobody else may be reading it, but I would definitely be writing. I mean, it's something that I've always done my whole life. I've always had journals and notebooks and things where I wrote stories and I would imagine that I would still be doing that. There was and I mean I've done everything really. I mean I've been things from a tow truck dispatcher all the way to a cashier in Walmart. I was in U.S. Army military intelligence. I worked at Knott's Berry Farm for a while. So I've kind of had a bunch of different things that I dabbled in. But I was really interested in hospitality for a long time. I worked in hotels for a long time, and it was something that I had seriously considered doing. Um, I did find it to be somewhat of a deficit that hotels never close. They're open 24/7 and on holidays, and I'm like, I'm never going to get a break. And I figured that out as a front desk manager that, it was, anytime somebody called in sick or there was some sort of emergency, I had to be at the hotel. And it was like, oh my God, I don't think I could do this forever. But, it was always one of those things. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a novelist when I was 12 years old. And I always feel like everything that I did between then and now was kind of, detours that gave me flavor for my books, different experiences, meeting different people, doing different things. Um, I I really don't know. I mean, it was when I finally sat down to write in 2003, it was just like I just knew. I mean, I knew I was going to be a writer, and then I really never considered anything else to a very serious degree.
And now I would just want to ask a few questions to let all the fans know a little bit about who you are. Who is Sylvia? And these are just random little questions. First is, what's your favorite movie?
Gone with the Wind. And here I am, a romance novelist, and I talk about a movie where there is no happy end. But I love that movie, and of course the reason why is because of Scarlett. I mean she's just a strong, determined woman, and we don't see all of her story in the movie the way we did in the books. All of the children that she had, all the marriages that she had, but that woman is a survivor, and that is a trait I hugely admire in both men and women, but especially in women. So I just love that movie. It's one of those ones where I mean it's an all day event, right? I mean you'd be sitting there all day. That thing's pretty long, but I love it.
And your favorite junk food? What's your guilty pleasure when it comes to junk food?
No, that's an easy one. That is the double extra flaming hot Cheetos. And that's the Cheetos in the black bag. It's not just the flaming hot, it's the extra flaming hot Cheetos. Those things are so addictive. I absolutely love them. And I actually, they're great for when I'm writing because they're so hot. You eat just a few of those, and then you're like mentally alert. You're like, oh my God, I'm totally awake. And then you're ready to roll. But I love them. And they're so hot that there's some places in the country where they're banned. They won't sell them because kids were eating them. They were a
I
little
was
bit
just
too
say they
hot.
seem like there's something that's hard to find. So
Yeah, yeah. Here in Vegas, you go to Walmart, there's like a huge rack of them. I'm like, see, you guys knew I was coming.
Um, and if you could have a cocktail with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Wow.
I would love to sit down with that guy for an hour or two. And yeah, I think that would be fabulous.
And what's playing on your iPod right now?
What was I listening to last night? Actually, it was Van Halen that I was listening to just last night. Haven't listened to any music today, but yeah, I was rocking out
Right.
to good old Sammy
One
Hagar and
one
Van
more
Halen.
final random question for you. Let's see, red or white when it comes to wine. Are you a red wine lady or a
Wine.
white wine lady?
Yeah, no, I'm
Are
a
you a
red
vodka
girl.
lady or a beer lady?
Yeah, no, I love my red wine. I am a huge fan of the Chateau Saint Michel Riesling. I love it, and for a nice lunch, nice light lunch during the day. I mean, I love having that nice, crisp, cool. It's fabulous. But I'm definitely a red girl. Can drink red wine for hours and enjoy it immensely. Also love champagne.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love champagne? So I'm going to jump back to these fan questions here. Um, let's see here. I had one lined up for you. And a lot of these we've already answered, and some of them are spoilers, so I'll stay away from those. Let's see. Will there soon be a book 3 of the Jackson Gia series?
No, no. Afterburn and Aftershock is the beginning and the end of Jackson Gia. There are no books planned for them.
Let's see here. This is from Chloe. Doesn't your husband get jealous when you're writing about Gideon? That man is heaven on earth, so I can assume you're a bit consumed when writing Gideon's story.
No, no, he doesn't get jealous. He's over 10 years. I mean, he's gotten used to me being in love with a multitude of men. I wish I could say they were my harem, but they're happily committed to women who aren't me. But no, he's used to it. Plus, he's got plenty of things he's doing on his own. So there's a lot of times when I step out of my writing cave and I'm like, hey, where's everybody? And nobody's here because they're all out doing their own things and whatever. So it works out really well that we've all got our own activities that we stay with, and mine of course happens to be hanging out with pretty hot guys all the time. It's not a bad way to go.
That's a good problem to have. Let's see here. This is from KK. How tall is Ava compared to the average American woman of 5'4"?
I believe Ava was mentioned as being 5'4", if I remember correctly, in one of the books. She is almost a foot shorter than Gideon.
See here. This is from Angela. You've done a great job developing these characters and showing the emotional scars that may plague a sexual abuse survivor. So, did you have to do further research on that subject for the Crossfire series?
Absolutely. And I'm assuming by further research, you mean, after having, like, if my research into it has continued as I've been writing the series. Obviously, I did a lot of research into that before I started. I was working on the background for Ava and Gideon about a year before I began writing the books. So there was that. But yes, I continue to talk to people about it because there's, different stages that we're seeing Gideon and Ava go through. Ava's further along in her healing process than Gideon is. I mean, Gideon is, I mean, he hasn't healed at all. He hasn't dealt with any of it. I mean, his thing is just, if I act like it didn't happen, then it didn't. And he learned that defense mechanism from his mother, and it's one that Ava doesn't agree with, as we've seen. She feels like the best thing to do with an issue is to confront it head on. And that's, something that she's working on helping me with. But yeah, I have to continue to talk to survivors and to research into it. Also, the development of Gideon's atypical sexual parasomnia is something I've been working on as well. So um, it never ends. And of course, as I do more research, I realize how much more of their healing process there is to tell, and and trying not to feel constrained by two books in doing that. um, it's it's a difficult road to travel that they're on.
And from Andrea, is there ever a time as an author that you get scared about writing something too dark?
Yes, yeah, definitely with the Crossfire series. That's one of the reasons why I didn't offer Bear to You to any of my many domestic publishers. at the time that I was writing it because I didn't want to run the risk of an editor saying that, some of the things that Gideon does, whether consciously or unconsciously, being unheroic and needing to change those things. Because, as I said, my characters come to me just the way they are. I don't, try to, build a character from, little building blocks of things that I think should be there. I mean, they really come to me just fully formed. And he was who he was, and I wasn't open to changing him, so I didn't shop the book to any of my editors, which they ended up questioning me about later. Why didn't you let me read this? And it was like I wasn't open to making any changes, and that's something to consider when you go to work with an editor, because it's meant to be a collaborative process. They bring something, you bring something, and if you're not willing to collaborate, then you really have to consider, whether you want to go that route or not. In my case, I chose to self-publish Fear to You originally when it was acquired later on by my longtime editor at Penguin. You know, we didn't change more than 50 words in the whole thing, and those are mostly just copy edit sorts of things. It was nothing major. But I was really worried that it was going to be too dark, not just for my editors, but also for my readers. I anticipated that Bear to You would have a very hard time finding an audience. And really, I mean, at the time I put it up, I was just hoping that 10 people would read it and like it. I had no expectation that it would get farther than that based on how dark the subject matter is.
And that led right to my next question, which I think you just answered. This is from Nicole. Did the success of Crossfire surprise you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't expecting it at all. I really, part of the reason why, I self-published Bared to You, in addition to, worrying about whether it was going to find an audience or find an editor, was to kind of build a chain for future self-published releases, so I could kind of learn all the mistakes I need to learn about distribution and packaging, marketing, that sort of thing, with a book that I had no expectation for whatsoever. And then I could take those lessons for a future self-published release that I had, higher expectations for, and then really, learn from those mistakes and put it forward. So, I mean, it was the complete opposite. I really had no expectation that the Crossfire series would become successful at all. Aside from the fact that it was a story of my heart that I love very much, and that I was able to put it out there and make it available, whether it found anybody or not. There was a certain amount of success in doing that, and feeling that sense of accomplishment that I got the book done and out there on my own.
So it looks like we have time for a few more. Let's see here. I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. This is from Chazzy, if I'm saying that right. Can you tell us anything about Megumi? Am I saying her name right, Sylvia? Megumi from the
Yes,
Crossfire
yeah,
series.
yeah, you are, Megumi. I'm not sure what there is I can tell you that you haven't already seen. I can say that you'll be seeing her, of course, in the next two books. She is one of Ava's few friends in New York as she builds, a new social circle for herself in her new town. So you'll definitely see more of her as we move forward. But that's really all I can say without it being a spoiler. Sorry.
Let's see. This is from Bronwyn. You said before that Gideon just talks to you. He tells his story. What does he sound like in your head?
Exasperated. Yeah, no, he gets exasperated with me. I spend a lot of time thinking about how hot he is, and he finds that very aggravating. So could you just concentrate on the story here and spend less time mooning? And I can't, of course, because I'm madly in love with him. So yeah, but most of my heroes have a tendency to get very exasperated with me. He is certainly not the only one. There's very few of them who've been, actually playful with me. Most of them kind of see me as a necessary evil to telling their story.
A few more questions here, some lighthearted ones. What's your perfect date night?
Dinner and a movie. And the movie has to be like a big, huge, blow 'em up action movie. And I really don't care if there's a plot, and I really don't care if it makes sense whatsoever. And it doesn't have to have any consistency, continuity. Doesn't have to have any reason to it whatsoever. Just as long as things are blowing up all over the place, I'm totally and hugely happy.
So you should go see X-Men if you haven't already then. Let's see here. What is your favorite dessert? That's from Stephanie Perez.
Tiramisu. I love tiramisu, but it has to be really good. I'm a tiramisu snob, I'll be honest with you. A lot of times they make it with like some sort of whipped creamy thing instead of actual cheese, and that doesn't cut it for me. It's yeah, or they don't use like actual, um, the coffee liqueur, and they use just kind of like espresso or like rum on there, and it's just like ugh. So it has to be really good espresso, but if it is, oh my god, I love it. I think it's amazing.
Let's see. This is from Helen. Would you ever consider adding a deleted scene section to any of your books? Another one of my favorite authors sometimes does this, and some of the scenes are my favorite.
There are some deleted scenes for the Dream Guardian series that were available on the Dream Guardians website, which is not up anymore. So, and that's actually something that I've been planning on moving over to my main website. Some of those deleted scenes. There's very few of my books that have deleted scenes. Almost everything usually ends up in the books because the characters are telling the story as it is. With the Dream Guardians books, the editor had a very different vision of what the story was from what I did. And so, scenes that I wrote for the book that focused too much on the plot, where she asked me to cut those, and so I did, and I put them aside, and then put them on the website for readers to see kind of a different side of the characters than maybe what they saw in the book that eventually made it to publication. But that is and that was actually only the first book in that series that I had that issue with the editor wanting me to remove some of the plot-based scenes from the book. And that's the only book that I've ever written where I've had anything like that. Typically, I'm asked to add scenes um, where something could be explained a little bit more in depth, or if there's an interaction between two secondary characters that the editor feels should be available for readers to see, then I'll do those and add those in. But I rarely have to cut anything. It's almost never. There's really not a lot of those that I have.
Let's see. One more here from Nicole. What do you consider your guilty pleasure?
Oh God. I
That's
mean,
what you've
anytime I
explained
eat
already.
something naughty, that's definitely a guilty pleasure. And I do that more than I should. There's some things I give myself credit for that I say aren't exactly guilty, but yeah, for the most part, anytime I eat something bad, it's guilty pleasure. Taking a day off for me is a huge guilty pleasure. I rarely do that, where I take a day. I still always write something, but every once in a while, once in a great while, once every 3 or 4 months, I'll actually take a day where I just give myself permission to watch TV or read a book or all day long versus, for a few hours, as kind of a reward after finishing the end of the day. And I always feel guilty the next day. I'm like, damn it, I didn't do anything yesterday.
Well, I think that that's probably well deserved for you since you are so busy. That brings us about the time to wrap up here. So we want to thank everyone that joined us, that watched today, and submitted all your great questions. We do these fan chats monthly, so if your question didn't get answered today, make sure to jump back and join us again next month, and Sylvia will try to answer it then. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Sylvia, and everyone have a great
Thank
day.
you. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out, spending the afternoon with me. It's always great chatting with you. I look forward to these Q&As every month that we do them. I love that it gets us, a chance to interact as directly as possible, even though we're doing it through the internet. So I look forward to seeing those of you who come out to the next Q&A next month. And thank you again for spending a Sunday afternoon with me. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank everyone. Have a great night.